I sat in that courtroom watching Vernon lean back in his chair with that same smug smile he'd been wearing for the past 6 months. The smile that said he'd already won. The smile that said I was just a foolish old woman who didn't know any better. "Your Honor," his lawyer said, shuffling papers like this was the easiest case she'd ever handled. "The divorce papers are signed by both parties. Mr. Vernon Hayes is entitled to the marital home as stipulated in the separation agreement Mrs. Hayes signed 3 weeks ago." Vernon's smile got wider. He actually had the nerve to wink at me across the aisle, like this was all some kind of game he'd just won. The judge, a stern-looking woman with silver streaks in her hair, looked down at the papers. "Mrs. Hayes, you signed these documents of your own free will?" I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Vernon actually laughed. Not loud, but loud enough that everyone in that courtroom heard it. "She signed them, Your Honor. My wife, ex-wife, isn't too good with legal matters. Never has been." That's when my lawyer, a young woman named Camille Jefferson, who'd been sitting quietly beside me, touched my arm gently. "May I, Mrs. Hayes?" she whispered. I nodded, my hands shaking in my lap. "Your Honor." Camille stood up, and something in her voice made Vernon's smile flicker just a little. "Before you make your final ruling, there's one document we need to bring to the court's attention. Before we continue, shout out to Tyrell Washington from Memphis. We appreciate the love you show by commenting and sharing. Let me take you back to where this all started. Not 3 weeks ago when I signed those papers with Vernon breathing down my neck. Not 6 months ago when he first filed for divorce. But 27 years ago, when I was 52 years old and thought I was getting a second chance at love. My first husband, Gerald, passed away in 1996. Heart attack. One day he was here, the next he wasn't. We'd been married 30 years, raised 2 children, and built a good life together. When he died, he left me the house on Maple Street, the house his grandmother had left to him, the house where we'd raised our babies, the house that held every memory of our life together. That house was my everything. 3 bedrooms, a front porch where I'd sit with my coffee every morning, a backyard where my grandchildren played. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Gerald made sure of that. The deed was in my name, free and clear. No mortgage, no debt, just mine. I spent 2 years alone in that house, healing. My daughter Rochelle checked on me every day. My son Darnell came by every Sunday after church. My sister Paulette kept telling me I was too young to be alone forever, but I wasn't looking for anyone. I was content. Then I met Vernon at a church picnic in 1998. He was handsome, I'll give him that. Tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and a smile that could light up a room. He was recently divorced, he told me, after a difficult marriage. He had 2 grown sons who lived out of state. He worked as a manager at an auto parts store. Nothing fancy, he said, but honest work. We started slow, coffee after Sunday service, dinner at Lucille's Diner on Friday nights, walks through the park. He was charming. He listened when I talked about Gerald, never seemed jealous of my past. He brought me flowers. He made me laugh. 6 months later, he proposed. "Dolores," he said, down on one knee in my living room, "you've brought joy back into my life. I know I can never replace Gerald, but I promise to honor his memory by taking care of you the way he would have wanted." I said yes. I was lonely, and Vernon seemed like a good man. My children had their doubts, Rochelle especially, but I told them I knew what I was doing. I was 53 years old, not some naive girl. But Rochelle insisted on one thing. "Mama," she said, sitting at my kitchen table the week before the wedding, "I love you, but you need to protect yourself. Get a prenup. That house is yours. Daddy left it to you. You need to make sure it stays yours no matter what." I didn't want to. It felt unromantic, like I was planning for the marriage to fail before it even started. But Rochelle wouldn't let it go. She even offered to pay for the lawyer herself. "Please, Mama," she begged. "Just this one thing. For me and Darnell. That house is our family home, our children's inheritance. Just protect it. So I did. I went to a lawyer, a friend of Rochelle's named Mr. Cornelius Banks. He drew up a simple prenuptial agreement. The house on Maple Street would remain my sole property. Everything else could be shared, but the house was mine. If we divorced, Vernon got nothing from the house. If I died, the house went to my children, not to Vernon. When I showed Vernon the papers, I held my breath. But he just smiled, that charming smile. Of course, Dolores. I understand completely. That house is your history. I respect that. He signed without hesitation. We got married 2 weeks later at Bethel Baptist Church, with both our families there. Rochelle and Darnell smiled, but I could see the worry in their eyes. For the first few years, things were good. Vernon moved into my house. Our house, I started calling it, even though legally it was still just mine. He was attentive, helpful, kind. He got along with my children well enough, though Rochelle always kept her distance. But slowly, things changed. It started small. Vernon began making comments about the house, how it needed updating, how we should renovate the kitchen, how the roof was getting old. I'd remind him that the house was fine, that Gerald had kept it in good condition, that I couldn't afford major renovations on my pension anyway. Your pension, he'd say, his voice getting that edge I hadn't heard before. Our pension, Dolores. We're married now. Then his sons started visiting. They'd never come around before, but suddenly Garrett and Kendrick were at our house every few months, always asking about money, always looking around the house like they were appraising it. Vernon would disappear into his office with them for hours, talking in low voices. My children noticed. Mama, something's not right, Darnell said one Sunday after church. Vernon's been asking me about property values in the neighborhood, asking if you've thought about selling. We're not selling, I told him firmly. This is our family home. But Vernon kept pushing. He started bringing up the idea of downsizing, moving to a condo. We're getting older, Dolores. We don't need all this space. We could sell this place, split the money, get something smaller and easier to maintain. Split the money? I asked. Vernon, you know this house is mine. The prenup? That old thing? He laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. Dolores, we've been married 15 years. You think any judge would honor a prenup after that long? Besides, I've put work into this house. I've maintained it. I have equity here, whether that paper says so or not. That's when I first felt the cold fear settle in my stomach. 20 years into our marriage, Vernon changed completely. He became distant, critical. Everything I did was wrong. My cooking was bland. My friends were annoying. My children were ungrateful. He started spending more time away from home. Started being secretive about money. Then I found out why. One evening, Rochelle came by unexpectedly. She looked like she'd been crying. Mama, she said, I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it. She'd seen Vernon at a restaurant downtown, with a woman, a younger woman. They weren't just having dinner, they were holding hands across the table. When Rochelle confronted him in the parking lot, Vernon didn't deny it. He just smiled that same smile he'd had in the courtroom today. Your mother and I have an understanding, he told Rochelle. This doesn't concern you. I confronted him that night. He didn't apologize. Instead, he went on the attack. You want to know the truth, Dolores? I'm tired. I'm tired of living in a dead man's house. I'm tired of being compared to perfect Gerald. I'm tired of pretending I'm happy in this outdated little box you refuse to update or sell. Then leave, I said, my voice shaking. The door's right there, Vernon. This is my house, and you can go anytime. That's when his face changed. Got cold, calculating. Your house, he said slowly. We'll see about that. He filed for divorce 2 weeks later. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was what came next. Vernon's lawyer contacted me with settlement papers. He was demanding half the value of the house. His lawyer argued that after 25 years of marriage, the prenup was invalid. that Vernon had contributed to the household, maintained the property, and deserved compensation. I showed the papers to Rochelle and Darnell. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Rochelle had begged me to get the prenup all those years ago, and read through the legal language. "This is insane," Darnell said. "The prenup clearly states—" "He's going to fight it," Rochelle interrupted. "He's going to claim it's not enforceable after this long." I hired Camille Jefferson, a young lawyer from our church. She was smart, thorough, and angry on my behalf. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, "that prenup is ironclad. Don't worry, we're going to fight this." But Vernon had another trick up his sleeve. He showed up at my house one evening with his lawyer and two of his friends. Big men who stood behind him like bodyguards. "Dolores," he said, his voice all sweet reason, "let's not drag this out. Sign these new papers. You get to stay in the house until you sell it. Then we split the proceeds 50-50. It's fair." "No," I said. "The prenup says—" "The prenup is old, Dolores. No judge is going to enforce it. Sign these papers or we go to court, and you lose everything. Your choice." His friends moved closer. Not threatening exactly, but intimidating. I was 77 years old, alone in my house with 3 men I didn't trust. I signed. Camille was furious when I told her. "Mrs. Hayes, why didn't you call me? Those papers aren't valid if you signed under duress." But it was too late. We were going to court. And that's how I ended up in that courtroom, watching Vernon's smug smile, listening to his lawyer present the papers I'd signed, hearing him laugh at me like I was nothing. Until Camille stood up and said, "Your Honor, there's one document we need to bring to the court's attention." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a file. A file I'd almost forgotten about. A file that Camille had spent the last month tracking down through old court records and attorney archives. "Your Honor," Camille said, her voice clear and strong. 25 years ago, before Mr. and Mrs. Hayes married, they signed a prenuptial agreement. This agreement specifically states that the property at 4782 Maple Street, the house in question, is and shall remain the sole property of Mrs. Dolores Hayes, regardless of the length of the marriage or any circumstances of divorce. Vernon's smile finally disappeared. His face went pale. That's ancient history," he stammered. This prenuptial agreement was properly filed, properly executed, and never invalidated or superseded," Camille continued, handing copies to the judge. "The papers Mr. Hayes is presenting, which Mrs. Hayes signed under duress just 3 weeks ago, directly contradict this legal, binding agreement. Moreover, Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes signed those papers while being intimidated by Mr. Hayes and 2 of his associates in her own home, without her attorney present." The judge took the file, started reading. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her eyes moving quickly across the pages. Vernon's lawyer was flipping through her own papers, confused. "Your Honor, we weren't aware—" "You weren't aware of a legally filed prenuptial agreement?" The judge's voice was sharp. "That seems like a significant oversight, Counselor." Vernon stood up, his face red now. "Your Honor, I've lived in that house for 25 years. I've paid for repairs, maintenance—" "Sit down, Mr. Hayes," the judge said. But Vernon didn't sit. Instead, he turned to me, and for the first time, I saw real panic in his eyes. "Dolores, please," he said. "Don't do this. We can work this out. I'll forget about the house. We can just—" "Mr. Hayes," the judge's voice was like ice. "Sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt of court." Vernon sat, but his eyes never left mine, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was something darker. Something that made me realize this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The judge set down the prenuptial agreement and looked directly at Vernon. The silence in that courtroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Mr. Hayes," she said. Her voice measured and cold. "Do you recall signing this prenuptial agreement on September 12, 1998? Vernon's jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he waved her off. I signed it, yes. But, Your Honor, that was 25 years ago. Circumstances change. I've contributed to that household. The prenuptial agreement makes no provision for length of marriage invalidating its terms, the judge interrupted. She looked at the papers in front of her, then at Vernon's lawyer. Counselor, the separation agreement you've presented directly contradicts a legally binding prenuptial agreement that was never dissolved or modified. Moreover, there are allegations that your client obtained Mrs. Hayes's signature on these papers through intimidation. Vernon's lawyer stood up quickly. Your Honor, that's a serious accusation without any proof. I have proof, Camille said quietly. She pulled out another folder. Mrs. Hayes's neighbor, Mrs. Phyllis Crawford, witnessed 3 men entering Mrs. Hayes's home on the evening of October 18th. She became concerned and recorded the encounter on her phone from her window across the street. The audio clearly shows Mr. Hayes and his associates pressuring Mrs. Hayes to sign documents without her attorney present. I hadn't known Phyllis recorded anything. The dear woman had called me that night after Vernon left, asked if I was okay, but she'd never mentioned a recording. She must have given it to Camille later. Vernon shot to his feet again. This is ridiculous. That's my wife, my ex-wife. I had every right. You have no right to intimidate anyone into signing legal documents, the judge said, her voice rising for the first time. Mr. Hayes, sit down now, or I will have the bailiff remove you from this courtroom. Vernon sat, but his hands were gripping the table so hard his knuckles had gone white. The judge looked at me for the first time since Camille had presented the prenup. Her expression softened just slightly. Mrs. Hayes, this court recognizes the valid prenuptial agreement signed in 1998. The property at 4782 Maple Street is and remains your sole property. The separation agreement signed on October 18th is hereby declared invalid due to evidence of coercion. Mr. Hayes has 30 days to vacate the premises and remove his personal belongings. She banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. Vernon's face went through about 10 different emotions in 5 seconds. Shock, disbelief, rage. He turned to me and that dark look was back, but this time he didn't try to hide it. You're going to regret this, he said quietly, so quietly only I could hear him. You think you've won? This is just the beginning, Dolores. The bailiff moved forward, and Vernon finally stood and walked out, his lawyer rushing after him trying to calm him down. Camille grabbed my hand and squeezed. You did it, Mrs. Hayes. The house is yours. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was that cold dread settling deeper into my bones. Because I knew Vernon. And I knew he meant what he said. I went home that afternoon expecting to find the house empty too. Vernon's lawyer had assured Camille that he would begin moving his belongings out immediately, even though he had 30 days. But when I pulled into my driveway, Vernon's car was there, and so was a moving truck. And so were his 2 sons, Garrett and Kendrick, carrying boxes out of my house. My house. I got out of Rochelle's car, she'd driven me home from court, and walked up to the front porch. Garrett was coming out carrying a box of what looked like my photo albums. That's mine, I said, reaching for the box. Garrett pulled it away. Dad said we're taking everything that has any value. You want to fight about it? Call your lawyer. Rochelle stepped between us. Put the box down, Garrett. Those are family photos. They belong to Mama. They're Dad's memories, too, Kendrick said from the doorway. He has a right to his memories. Memories of my children? I said, my voice shaking. Those are pictures of Rochelle and Darnell growing up. Your father wasn't even there. Vernon appeared in the doorway then, that smile back on his face. Dolores, welcome home. We're just collecting my things, as the judge ordered. Those photo albums aren't your things. Well, that's debatable, isn't it? I was part of this family for 25 years. I think I'm entitled to some memories. Rochelle pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. For what? Vernon laughed. Moving my belongings out of a house I'm legally required to vacate? Be my guest. Call them. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your harassment. But Rochelle did call, and 15 minutes later, Officer Desmond Williams from our neighborhood patrol showed up. He'd known my family for years, had grown up 3 streets over. Mrs. Hayes, he said, tipping his hat to me. What seems to be the problem? Vernon immediately turned on the charm. No problem, officer. Just a misunderstanding. I'm moving out as ordered by the court, and my ex-wife is upset about which items I'm taking. Officer Williams looked at the moving truck, then at the boxes. May I see what's being loaded? For the next hour, Officer Williams went through every box. Most of Vernon's belongings were legitimate. His clothes, his personal items, some furniture he'd brought into the marriage. But there were other things. My grandmother's china, photo albums from before Vernon and I met, a jewelry box that had belonged to my mother. These items, Officer Williams said, appear to be Mrs. Hayes's personal property from before the marriage. They need to stay. Vernon's face got red. This is harassment. I'm being persecuted. Sir, you can take your personal belongings, but items that belonged to Mrs. Hayes before your marriage are not yours to take. If you disagree, you can file a civil suit. But right now, these boxes stay. Garrett and Kendrick looked at their father, waiting for instructions. For a moment, I thought Vernon was going to explode. But then he just smiled again, that cold, calculating smile. Fine, he said. Keep your old junk, Dolores. I don't need any of it where I'm going. They loaded the truck with Vernon's legitimate belongings and left, but not before Vernon stopped on the porch and looked back at me. 30 days, Dolores. I have 30 days. A lot can happen in 30 days. After they left, Rochelle and I went through the house. It was a mess. Vernon and his sons had gone through everything, rifling through drawers, closets, cabinets. It looked like a tornado had hit. But worse than the mess was what I discovered in the basement. The water heater was broken. Not just broken, deliberately damaged. Someone had hit it with something heavy, denting the tank and breaking the pressure valve. Water was pooling on the floor. Mama, Rochelle said, her voice tight, this is sabotage. We called Officer Williams back. He took photos, wrote a report, but his face said it all. Without proof of who did this, Mrs. Hayes, there's not much I can do. Could have been damaged during the move. It was fine this morning, I said. I checked it this morning before I left for court. I believe you, but proving it? That's another matter. Document everything. Take photos, keep records. If this continues, we'll have a pattern of harassment. If this continues. Those words haunted me that night as I lay in bed, alone in my house for the first time since the divorce was finalized. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the floorboards made me think Vernon had come back. Rochelle wanted me to stay with her, but I refused. This was my house, my home. I wasn't going to be driven out of it. The next morning, I called a plumber. $700 to replace the water heater. Money I hadn't budgeted for. Money I could barely afford on my pension. But that was just the beginning. Over the next week, things kept going wrong. The kitchen sink started leaking. Not a little leak, a major pipe burst that flooded my kitchen. The locksmith I called said someone had tried to jimmy the back door lock, damaging it beyond repair. My mailbox was broken off its post and thrown in the yard. Each time I called Officer Williams. Each time he took a report, but there was never any proof. Mrs. Hayes, he said gently after the mailbox incident, have you thought about getting security cameras? I hadn't. I'd never needed them before. But I talked to Darnell about it, and he came over that weekend with a system he'd bought online. We installed cameras at the front door, back door, and driveway. The vandalism stopped after that. But Vernon was still living in my house for another 3 weeks. He'd moved into the spare bedroom, the one we used to use for storage. He stayed in there most of the time. only coming out late at night when he thought I was asleep. But I heard him. Heard him walking through the house like he owned it. Heard him on the phone sometimes, his voice low and angry. I started spending more time at church. Pastor Raymond and the congregation had been wonderful through the divorce, and now they rallied around me even more. Sisters from the church came by to check on me. They brought food, sat with me, prayed with me. "You're not alone, Dolores," Sister Phyllis told me. She was the one who'd recorded Vernon that night. "We've got your back." But even with their support, I was terrified in my own home. Then one night, 2 weeks before Vernon's deadline to move out, I smelled smoke. I woke up coughing, my bedroom filled with a thin haze. I stumbled out of bed, my heart racing, and followed the smell to the kitchen. The stove was on, all 4 burners going full blast, and on top of them, someone had left dish towels. They were smoldering, just starting to catch fire. I grabbed the fire extinguisher I kept under the sink, thank God for that, and put out the flames before they could spread. Then I stood there in my smoky kitchen, shaking so hard I could barely stand. Vernon's bedroom door opened. He came out in his pajamas, looking confused and sleepy. "What's all the noise? What's burning?" "You," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You did this." "Did what? Dolores, what are you talking about?" "You turned on the stove. You put those towels there. You tried to burn down my house." His face was all innocent concern. "I did no such thing. You probably left the stove on yourself and forgot." "You're getting older, Dolores. Memory problems are common at your age." "Get out," I said. "Get out of my house right now." "I have 30 days. I don't care what the judge said. Get out before I call the police and tell them you tried to kill me." Vernon's mask finally dropped. His face went cold and hard. "You can't prove anything, Dolores. You're just a confused old woman who probably did leave the stove on. Who's going to believe you?" But this time, I had proof. Because this time, the camera Darnell had installed in the kitchen had caught everything. I called Officer Williams, Camille, and both my children. They all came over within an hour. We watched the camera footage together. Clear as day, it showed Vernon coming into the kitchen at 2 a.m., turning on all 4 burners, taking dish towels from the drawer and laying them across the burners, then walking back to his room. "That's attempted arson," Officer Williams said quietly. "That's a criminal offense." Vernon was arrested that night. He was released on bail the next morning, but the judge immediately modified the divorce order. He was banned from the property immediately. If he came within 500 feet of me or my house, he'd be arrested again. I should have felt safe then, but I knew Vernon, and I knew he wasn't done. 3 days later, I got a call from my bank. Someone had tried to withdraw $10,000 from my savings account. The teller, suspicious because it wasn't my usual branch and the man didn't look like me, asked for extra identification. When he couldn't provide it, they denied the withdrawal and flagged my account. The security cameras at the bank showed Vernon wearing a disguise trying to impersonate me, or more accurately, trying to use a power of attorney document that he'd forged. More charges, more court appearances, more stress. Camille sat with me in her office after the bank incident. "Mrs. Hayes, Vernon is escalating. These aren't just petty annoyances anymore. He's trying to destroy you financially and possibly physically. We need to get a restraining order upgraded. We need to make sure you're protected." "I am protected," I said tiredly. "I have cameras. I have the police on speed dial. I have my children checking on me constantly. What more can I do?" Camille leaned forward. "There's something else. I've been digging into Vernon's finances. And Mrs. Hayes, I think I know why he's so desperate to get your house." She pulled out a folder. "Vernon is broke. Not just broke, he's drowning in debt. He owes money to 3 different casinos. He has 6 credit cards maxed out. He took out a loan against his car and defaulted. He's facing bankruptcy." I stared at the papers in shock. "How? He worked for 25 years. He gambled it all away. That woman you saw him with? She works at a casino. I think she's how he got started. But Mrs. Hayes, here's the worst part. 6 months before he filed for divorce, Vernon took out a loan with a private lender. A very bad private lender. He borrowed $50,000 at an insane interest rate. He told them he'd pay it back when he sold his house in the divorce. But he didn't have a house to sell, I whispered. Exactly. And now those people want their money. Vernon told them he was about to come into a lot of money from a divorce settlement. He promised them your house, Mrs. Hayes. My blood ran cold. What happens when they find out he can't pay? Camille's face was grim. People who lend money like that don't usually accept "I can't pay" as an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about Vernon, about his desperation, about the dangerous people he owed money to. At 3 a.m., I heard glass breaking. I grabbed my phone and called 911, then huddled in my bedroom with the door locked, listening to someone moving around downstairs, breaking things, searching for something. The police arrived in 4 minutes. They found my back door smashed in, my living room ransacked, and my grandmother's china cabinet emptied out. But they didn't find the intruder. Whoever it was had fled when they heard the sirens. The cameras caught him, though. Not Vernon this time. One of his sons, Kendrick, searching through my house like he was looking for something valuable, something he could take and sell quickly. When Officer Williams showed me the footage, I finally broke down and cried. This is never going to end, is it? As long as Vernon owes money, as long as he's desperate, he's going to keep coming after me. But Officer Williams surprised me. He smiled. Actually, Mrs. Hayes, I think it might end sooner than you think. We just arrested Kendrick. He's not as tough as his daddy, and I bet once we offer him a deal in exchange for testimony against Vernon, he's going to sing like a canary. He was right. Kendrick took the deal. And what he told the police changed everything. Kendrick told the police everything. And I mean everything. Vernon hadn't just borrowed $50,000 from dangerous people. He'd been running a scheme for over a year, taking out loans and credit cards using fraudulent information, promising to pay everyone back once he got his half of the house. He'd told people the house was worth $300,000 and that the divorce would net him $150,000 easy. But it got worse. Vernon had already pre-sold the house. He'd found a real estate investor who dealt in distressed properties, told him a sob story about needing to sell quickly, and gotten a cash offer of $200,000, well below market value, but fast. Vernon had taken a $20,000 advance on that sale, promising the property would be his within 90 days. That $20,000 was already gone. Gambled away at the casino where his girlfriend worked. Now Vernon had dangerous loan sharks after him, an investor demanding either his money back or the property, maxed out credit cards, and no way to pay any of them. His plan had been simple: destroy me emotionally and physically until I either died or was declared incompetent, then have his sons claim the house as my caretakers. When Camille told me all this in her office the next day, I couldn't breathe. He was trying to kill me, I said. Not quickly, but slowly. Break me down until you had a heart attack or a stroke, yes, Camille said gently. Or until he could convince a judge you were mentally unfit and needed a guardian. He'd already started laying groundwork for that, telling people you were forgetful, confused, leaving the stove on. But the cameras proved this time. But if he'd succeeded in burning down the house with you in it, it would have looked like a tragic accident. An elderly woman who left the stove on and couldn't escape in time. I felt sick. This man I'd married, this man I'd shared my home with for 25 years, had been planning my death. What happens now, I asked. Now? Now Vernon faces multiple felony charges: attempted arson, fraud, forgery, attempted theft. And the district attorney is very interested in his loan shark connections. Vernon's going to prison, Mrs. Hayes. For a long time. But that didn't make me feel safer. Because as Camille explained, desperate people do desperate things. And Vernon was about to lose everything: his freedom, his money and whatever dignity he had left. "You need protection," Camille said. "Real protection. I'm going to talk to the DA about a protective detail until Vernon is locked up." That night, I stayed with Rochelle. I couldn't be in my house anymore, not until Vernon was behind bars. My home, the place that should have been my sanctuary, felt like a crime scene. Pastor Raymond called a special prayer meeting for me at church that Wednesday night. The whole congregation showed up. They prayed, they sang, they surrounded me with love. Sister Phyllis grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. "The devil's been busy, Sister Dolores," she said. "But God's going to have the last word. You watch and see." I wanted to believe her, but fear had taken root deep in my bones. The next day, Officer Williams called me at Rochelle's house. "Mrs. Hayes, Vernon's been spotted in your neighborhood. We have officers looking for him, but I need you to stay where you are. Don't go home." "What's he doing there?" I asked, my heart racing. "We don't know, but he knows he's about to be arrested on new charges. He's desperate. Just stay safe." But 2 hours later, my doorbell camera sent an alert to my phone. Someone was at my front door. I opened the app with shaking hands and saw Vernon standing on my porch. He was looking directly at the camera. "Dolores," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I know you can see this. I know you're watching. I just want to talk. I want to explain. Can you please just listen to me?" I called Officer Williams immediately. "He's at my house. He's violating the restraining order. We're on our way. Don't respond to him. Don't engage." But Vernon kept talking to the camera. 25 years, Dolores. 25 years I stood by you. And this is how you repay me? You take everything? You leave me with nothing?" His voice was getting louder, more agitated. "That house should be half mine. I earned it. I lived there. I took care of you." Then his face got closer to the camera, and I could see tears streaming down his cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. "You've destroyed my life, Dolores. Everything I had, everything I worked for, gone because you're a selfish, greedy old woman who can't let go of a dead man's house." He picked up one of my flower pots, the ones I'd planted petunias in last spring, and threw it at my front window. The glass shattered. He picked up another and threw it through the living room window. "If I can't have it, nobody can," he screamed. Then he pulled something out of his jacket, a red gas can. My heart stopped. I watched through the camera as Vernon unscrewed the cap and started splashing gasoline on my front porch, my door, my windows. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Rochelle grabbed the phone from me and started screaming at the 911 operator. "He's going to burn down her house! He has gasoline! Send everyone now!" Through the camera, I watched Vernon pull out a lighter. He was still crying, still screaming. 25 years, Dolores! 25 years! Then I heard the sirens. Vernon heard them too. He looked up, looked around, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. Realization. The understanding that he'd gone too far. But he flicked the lighter anyway. The porch erupted in flames. Vernon stepped back, watching his handiwork, that same sick smile on his face. That's when Officer Williams' patrol car came screaming around the corner. Behind him, 2 more police cars and a fire truck. Vernon ran. He actually tried to run, but he was 68 years old and out of shape from years of gambling and drinking. Officer Williams tackled him in my front yard. The firefighters put out the flames before they could spread beyond the porch. The damage was bad. My front door was destroyed, the porch would need to be rebuilt, the windows were melted and black, but the house was still standing. My house, my home, still standing. Vernon was arrested right there in my yard, handcuffed and screaming about how unfair everything was, how I'd ruined his life, how he'd loved me and I'd betrayed him. The cameras caught all of it, every word, every action, every crime. The trial happened 3 months later. Vernon's lawyer tried to argue mental breakdown, temporary insanity, the stress of the divorce. But between the camera footage, Kendrick's testimony, the loan shark records, and the paper trail of Vernon's schemes, there was no defense. Vernon was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Attempted arson, fraud, forgery, theft, violating a restraining order, destruction of property. The judge was not sympathetic. "Mr. Hayes," she said, a different judge from the divorce hearing, but just as stern, "you have shown a pattern of escalating violence and manipulation toward your ex-wife. You have shown no remorse. You have blamed everyone but yourself for your actions. This court finds that you are a danger to Mrs. Hayes and to society. 12 years in state prison, followed by 10 years probation. You are ordered to have no contact with Mrs. Hayes for the rest of your natural life." Vernon's face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known him, the mask fell away completely, and I saw what was underneath. Not a charming man, not even an angry man. Just a weak, pathetic man who'd gambled away his life and tried to blame everyone else for his failures. I felt sorry for him briefly. Then I remembered the gas can, the flames, the terror, and the pity evaporated. Garrett and Kendrick both got sentences too. Kendrick got probation in exchange for his testimony, but Garrett got 3 years for breaking and entering and attempted theft. The real estate investor who'd given Vernon the advance sued Vernon for his $20,000. Good luck collecting from a man in prison with no assets. The loan sharks? Officer Williams told me they'd been arrested in a larger organized crime sweep. Vernon's cooperation had actually helped bring down a major illegal lending operation. It was the first useful thing he'd done in years. But the best part, the part that made all the fear and stress and terror worth it, came 2 weeks after the sentencing. I was at my house, my home, supervising the contractors who were rebuilding my front porch. The insurance had covered most of the fire damage, and I'd chosen to upgrade a few things while they were at it. New paint, new railings, new flower boxes for my petunias. Pastor Raymond stopped by with Sister Phyllis and a few other church members. They brought food. As usual, black folks never visit empty-handed, and we sat in my living room eating sweet potato pie and talking. "How are you doing, Sister Dolores?" Pastor Raymond asked. "Really doing?" I thought about it. "I'm okay," I said. "Better than okay, actually. I'm free." And I was. For the first time in years, I felt light. No more walking on eggshells. No more wondering what Vernon was plotting. No more fear in my own home. My house was mine again. Really mine. No one could take it from me. The prenup had protected it from divorce, and now Vernon's criminal conviction meant he could never come near it again. But more than that, I was myself again. The woman I'd been before Vernon. Strong, independent, surrounded by people who loved me for me, not for what they could take from me. "You know what I'm going to do?" I told my friends. "I'm going to live, really live. I'm 78 years old, and I've spent too many years being afraid. I'm going to travel. I'm going to spend time with my grandchildren. I'm going to plant a bigger garden. I'm going to join the church choir. I'm going to do all the things Vernon never wanted me to do." Sister Phyllis laughed and clapped her hands. "That's what I'm talking about. Live your life, sister." And I did. Over the next year, I took my grandchildren to Disney World, something I'd always wanted to do. I joined the choir and sang my heart out every Sunday. I started a garden club with some ladies from church. I even went on a cruise with Rochelle and Darnell and their families. I renovated my house the way I wanted it, with colors Gerald would have loved and furniture that made me smile. I had family barbecues in my backyard every summer Sunday. I hosted Thanksgiving and Christmas. I filled my home with love and laughter and life. My house became a home again. People at church started calling me Sister Strong because of how I'd survived Vernon's attacks. I didn't feel particularly strong. I'd just done what I had to do, but I accepted the nickname with grace. 1 year after Vernon's sentencing, Camille came by for dinner. We'd become friends through everything. This young lawyer who'd fought so hard for me. You know what I realized? I told her as we sat on my newly rebuilt porch, watching the sunset. Vernon didn't lose because of the prenup. The prenup helped, yes, but he lost because he underestimated me. He thought I was weak. He thought I was alone. He thought he could bully me into giving up. But you didn't give up, Camille said. No, I didn't. Because I had people who loved me. My children, my church, my neighbors, Officer Williams, you. Vernon was alone because he'd used and hurt everyone in his life. I was surrounded by love because I'd spent my life giving it. Camille smiled. That's a good lesson. It's the only lesson that matters, I said. In the end, love wins. Not manipulation, not fear, not greed, love. My phone buzzed with a text from Rochelle. She'd sent a picture of my granddaughter, sweet little Autumn, wearing a graduation cap. She was finishing kindergarten. I showed Camille the picture. This is what Vernon tried to take from me. Not just a house, my future, my family's future, my grandchildren's inheritance. Their memories in this home. But he didn't take it, Camille said. No, he didn't, because some things can't be taken. They can only be given, and I never gave him permission to destroy me. As the sun set over my neighborhood, over my home, over the life I'd reclaimed from the ashes of a toxic marriage, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Pure, complete, unshakable peace. Vernon was in prison. My house was mine. My family was safe. My future was bright. And I was free. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the courtroom when Camille presented the prenup. When Vernon's smile finally disappeared. When the judge ruled in my favor. That was the beginning of the end for Vernon. But it was the beginning of a new life for me. I'm 80 years old now, 2 years after everything happened. I still live in my house on Maple Street. I still have my morning coffee on the porch. I still host Sunday dinners for my family. But now, I do it all without fear, without looking over my shoulder, without wondering if someone's going to try to take it all away. Because I learned something through all of this. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I learned that having people who love you is worth more than any house or money. I learned that legal protections matter, that prenup saved my life in more ways than one. And I learned that sometimes the people who seem the most charming are actually the most dangerous. But I also learned that when you stand up for yourself, when you refuse to be bullied, when you surround yourself with good people, you can survive anything. Even a man who tried to burn down your life. My house is still standing, and so am I. Thank you for listening to the end. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this, and tell us in the comments what you think should happen next.